sense outside the context man and horse. It has no autonomy. There's no technological autonomy. It's well. Second example, the metallurgist Cyril Stanley Smith, who was at MIT for many, many years, and he was a metallurgist. Interested in the history of science and technology, Cyril Stanley Smith's conclusion after many years of study was that most of the important technologies in his field did not have their origins in science, but in the decorative arts. So all of metallurgy, in Smith's view, has its origins back in the decorative arts. Beautiful, not in warfare, not in making weapons, the decorative arts. That's where real invention, Smith says, occurred. So I won't give you the long quote, it's a great long quote, beautiful in that it returns some of our expectations. And here's a third example. If we think of the Stone Age, we always think of Stone Age tools as technology, and there's occasional Stone Age figures. It took a female archaeologist who had a background in fashion to point out to her male colleagues one day that the famous Venus of Willendorf, which is one of the very earliest statues, thought to be some kind of fertility goddess, has in fact got soft technology in it. The woman is wearing some kind of garment, some kind of bra garment. There's hair decoration. So soft technologies are invented coterminously with what we might call hard technologies. In relation to this, as I was looking for a slide to this, I came across this. A very witty interpretation by an American illustrator called Charles Henry, who makes my point for me. I've never seen this serendipitous discussion. But you can see what has been said here, that actually how we normally think we project our notion of scientific technology back into history. It's not in fact the case. Technology did not emerge out of science, it emerged out of the decorative age. It emerged out of anything, out of soft technologies, even more than it did hard technology. Now I think that most of you in this room, by the fact that you're in a design school, not an engineering school, would axiomatically agree that technologies are in fact linked to the human. The problem is, this is not conceptually, categorically, or pedagogically how we see technology. Certainly not from the perspective of the technological professions, and certainly not from the perspective of universities. They differentiate sharp technology. So in practice, we see technology, in practice meaning here in our heads, as autonomous and as distinct from subjects. Notice that we always talk about things like technology and persons, or technology and society, where the and does not mean connection but separation. It always indicates a problem, a relationship. So let's have a look at this. Let's look at this question about autonomy and technology emerging as a distinct field. Has it always been there as autonomous? Not at all. The evolution of modern technology is part of the intellectual division of labour that constitutes the modern world. It all happens between 25 years or so, either side of 1800, roughly. Those are the great years of how the split happened. It's part of the same split that sees the formation of art, in the modern sense, and also of a separate realm of ethics and the social sciences. So we have three realms beginning to separate: ethics, aesthetics, technology. It's one of the most significant splits that happens. So technology as a field or a discipline, as against an activity of making, that's always been there, doesn't begin to form until well after 1750. Professional and academic bodies in technology don't start until about 1820, I think the first. So one of the first is in civil engineering in France and Britain, that's about the early 19th century. Mechanical engineers don't really form as a profession until the 1840s, but by the 1870s, it is constituted as an autonomous practice. Now what happens when spheres separate? When we take a sort of, really two things, two stages happen, almost coterminous. One of them is that an relatively undifferentiated field splits. So the field of making splits off. And part of it becomes technology. What technologists would say real making. The rest of it is left as just work, stuff. Or we separate out, as we did in art, artists and printmakers, engravers, craftspeople. We separate those two. It's kind of separation. And the second thing is, the bit that is separated off begins to constitute itself as a professional and intellectual field. And it does so very quickly and very powerfully. It begins to define its sphere of action. It says, we're responsible for this sphere of action, we're going to police this sphere of action, and we're going to create the discursive and argumentative logic of this. Here's a picture of the early Royal Academy in London, one of the first academies of artists which differentiate artists, gentlemen artists, from mere printing tradesmen. And it's the beginning of the intellectual discourse in art, the idea that in fact you can have a kind of an artistic criteria of evaluation, which is anything. And the 19th century unfolds like this. The art criticism begins in the early 19th century. We go into, by the end of the 19th century, we're getting into art for art's sake, which is extremely important. It's the logic of the exploration of the purity. What is the essence of art? Malevich answers this in 1919, his famous painting, White on White. So that push towards purity, it happens in art, it happens also in technology, in a second. So, technology forms in fact in very similar ways. One of the key instances here, and this will refer to the slides I'm just about to show you, is civil engineers. Up until about 1840, at the latest, architects and civil engineers are educated often together, basically, very similar curriculum. This accounts, for example, often the aesthetic elegance of, say, 18th century forts. And if you've been to the Caribbean islands, one of the Caribbean islands have got small forts, and actually, almost without, if you walk around them, they're often extremely beautiful objects. The answer is, they're very good military engineers who are also trained as architects. By 1840, that's ended. Nowhere in the world are architects and civil engineers educated to be architects. The consequences are enormous. Let me actually, I think I can show you them actually visually, but just before I do, let me sort of make one important point. As these spheres emerge, it's not just that in the modern world art appears, technology appears, the social world appears, that it does not like it happens. It's that these spheres constitute, make the modern world, or better, in appearing they remake it, and in their own image. That's what I'm saying. So that these spheres are not like sort of passive to the modern world. They're not symptoms. They're actually constitutive. That's what's on. Now, let me try and give you a bit of visual proof of this, of the shift that happened. I'm going to show you a sequence of 5 bridges, 4 of them from New York. I'm going to show you them in almost exact chronological order. I hope you see what I mean. We start not in New York, but in North Wales. This is Telford's suspension bridge across the Menai Straits, which link Wales to the island of Anglesey, which took you then over to Ireland on ahead. This is the largest suspension bridge in the world when it's built in 1826. It's built at a time when it was felt axiomatic that such a structure should not only be a structure, an efficient structure, but it should have an address, as it were, to the wider world of which it's a part. In this case, you can see that Telford does this extraordinarily beautiful gesture. Very elegant statement where he's also making a statement about the site, the weaving together of the bridge and the site and so on. It's a kind of demonstration of how to insert a structure of this scale, and that's what, at that time, one of the largest structures in Britain, is probably not the largest structure in Britain, to insert that into a very quite fragile environment with elegance and sensibility. Now, by contrast, from New York City, 4 bridges you will all know. The Brooklyn Bridge, designed in the 1870s, opened in 1883, a vestige of a Telford-like conception, where the aesthetic, there is a notion of the bridge, some spectacle, there is an address to the spectator's experience, why people still love walking across this bridge. So it's a vestige of Telford-like. Next up, to the north, the Manhattan Bridge, opened in 1909, a purely engineering structure, but with a bits of sort of added ornament, very crude, actually, amateurish ornament, just what you'd expect from an engineer who had felt he had to add a little touch to the 101 decoration. But it's really an incredibly ugly structure. Nobody would fight to see it. Third bridge, the bridge that takes half of you home at night, the Williamsburg Bridge, opened in 1903. Just say, I'll forget it. They're just saying, forget it. We're just going to build the structure. Purely utilitarian, perhaps in some ways even better. And then 1936, the Triborough Bridge. Engineering as power, almost as brutality. You like it, you don't like it, it's tough. It just is. In your face. Nothing. Just asserts itself. Manliness, definitely. There's a touch of Jane Austen still here, a recognition of the delicate sensibilities of the bridge. The designer of this bridge doesn't give a damn. Now, I mean, we could be laughing at it, but there is, I think, a little bit, I'm not just nostalgic for Telford, although I think he was one of the great heroes. What we see here is that specialization means just that. Modern technology largely separates itself from the aesthetic and from the ethical, from the subjective and the social. It stands in its own autonomy, it replaces address, Telford, with power, Triborough. And in fact, from now on, power becomes the lure for technology, even aesthetically. It's already been so in the 19th century. This is the great Forth Rail Bridge between Edinburgh and the further north of Scotland, one of the most fabulous engineering structures of the 19th century. Astonishing piece of work. You can only look at it sort of almost close to awe. Or not that 1930s version, the Hoover Dam. The scale, especially in the 1930s, was thought to be absolutely awe-inspiring. And this notion of technology as awe-inspiring, a replacement for God, comes actually something that technology buys into. Bill Joy's article quotes Freeman Dyson, a scientist who is still alive, he's about 94 now, still writes review of books. He was a very young man, part of the Manhattan Project. I have felt it myself, this is Freeman Dyson. The glitter of nuclear weapons, it is irresistible if you come to them as a scientist. To feel it's there in your hands, to release this energy that fuels the stars and let you do your bidding. You perform these miracles. It's something that gives people an illusion of illimitable power, and it is in some ways responsible for all our troubles. This is what you might call technical arrogance that overcomes people when they see what they can do. So that's Dyson's warning. In our time, this godlike quality is not so much destructive awe, so much as this notion that technology has something in common with the cosmos as a whole, with evolution. This is this famous map of the internet done by Barrett Lyon, part of the Octave project to visualize the internet. And it's the kind of internet as universe, the cosmos into which you kind of dive. And you can see that people like Kurzweil and Kelly have heavily bought into this notion. Kelly's notion of the technion, Kurzweil's notion, this idea that you are, that technology and evolution become coterminous. Here's Kelly. A single thread of self-generation ties together the cosmos, the bias, and the mechanics into a single creation. And we can see actually that there's a huge temptation to do this, heaven's sake, you know. It's the temptation of envelopment, of losing yourself in a kind of infinite bliss of the universe. After all, compared to the sordidness of life, the messy reality, why not leave behind? Forget actualities, awkward, dirt, difficult, human recalcitrance, purity, the absolute purity of technological constructability. And that, of course, is the problem. Once you make technology all but mystical, you forget real-world issues. Now, the real problem, though, second-order problem, is that once you eschew the real, once you push the real away like that, what you discover is that technology, to some extent, always has had this tendency to do this. There's a very good argument to say that technology becomes modern technology, which is, I think, two things: the production of effects, the concentration of power, only when it leaves behind the hindrance of connection to the subject. If you have to think about persons, making a nuclear bomb is very difficult. The more you think about persons, the harder it is to make a nuclear bomb. The more you can not think about persons when you're making a nuclear bomb, the easier it is. It's as simple. It's almost as simple. Only by renouncing or expelling the subject could technology focus purely on the production of effects and on the objectively determined and purely performative criteria, including things like the reduction of complex, wicked situations to relatively simple bounded problems. The more you can reduce the simple bounded problems one dimension, then the easier it is to move forward. The more you can limit objectives, as Simon will indicate later, the more you can go forward. So basically, the argument is, technology can only operate on the basis of instrumental criteria and calculation, that which it needs because it offers you reliability and certainty. That's what technology offers. Once it's freed from the obligation to consider the subject, and freed also, notice that last bit of that quote there, from the awkwardness of consequences and implications. We hardly ever charge technologies with the crimes that, in a sense, they do. Think of the Ford Pinto car that was constructed, some of you may know, with its gasoline tank on the outside, so that in a crash it had an awful tendency to explode in flames. A lot of people died. Ford knew about the problem for years before he told it. But it was also an engineering. The engineers determined that they would do that. They discounted consequence and risk. We almost never ask a technologist to take on board the consequences of that. We actually give technology a free pass. Why? It's a Faustian law. We want the power. However, so we can say, oh, there's a beautiful example. The gas ovens that we used in the Holocaust in Auschwitz was one major German engineering firm was responsible for making the gas oven. I've seen an exhibition, it's extraordinary, fascinating reconstruction. At one point, towards the end of the war, there is a groveling letter from the managing director of the engineering firm to the SS, apologizing for the fact that his latest model of ovens didn't act quite as well to burn quite as many corpses as he anticipated. is very solid. It's interesting because the distancing which is necessary to do so. So, technology can only achieve itself, modern technology as such, and could only offer guaranteed certainty and reliability once it was distancing and objectification. Hence. So, however, once it did break free, and this is where the Faustian bargain comes from, once it could work larger from the laws and principles of operation derived from experimental science, then its development could be prodigious. And the most obvious example of this you're all dealing with now is Moore's law. That is to say, those of you who don't know it, the history of computing, the observation that over the history of computing hardware, the number of transistors on integrated circuits doubles approximately every 2 years. There's the graph. Now, if we think about all that I've been going on here, what we're virtually saying is that technology has a necessary vested interest in breaking with the subject. And if we now begin to put together that, and we try to think about some of the implications of the split between aesthetics, technology, and ethics, we can see some of the consequences that go through into our modern times, and which, if you like, determine where we are. Try and just round up here. So, let's take a few. I'm going to take a few kind of fairly random thinking about. Let's think about design itself in the context of this split between aesthetics, ethics, and technology. I've hinted to you, I think in the week one, that design is brought into being professionally in the early 19th century. Why? It is as a response to this split. Design is the bit, once you've got technology here, aesthetics here, ethics